Although women constitute 51% of the population, hardly a minority, many women begin to identify with minority groups and demand a liberation of their own.
I want the freedom not to have a husband. When women have to support their children and men help to rear them.
Many women in the civil rights and anti-war and student movements who had these ideals and shared them with men of their generation, but experienced discrimination, begin to question, wait a minute, if we're really going to have social justice and equality and participatory democracy, maybe it ought to start right here in this organization. And some women began to question gender hierarchy within the New Left. At the same time, Kennedy owed women's organizations who helped a narrow election victory in 1960. And his payback was a commission on the status of women. Eleanor Roosevelt was appointed to chair it, one of her last public roles before she died.
Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, passed in 1964 after Kennedy's death, not only bars employers from discriminating on the basis of race, religion, or national origin, but also on the basis of sex.
So the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was set up to implement the Civil Rights Act, non-discrimination, and lo and behold, all these women, working women, begin to complain of lower wages, exclusion from promotion, not getting jobs, discrimination of all kinds.
Equal work going on around. Equal pay for equal work going on around.
By the 1970s, increasingly more sort of complicated and sort of challenging forms of discrimination, for example, height and weight requirements that were there to keep women out when there was no real justification for that.
Labor and civil rights activists decided they needed a civil rights organization like the NAACP, and they called it the National Organization for Women. Not of women, but for women. Men were there as well as women. And they become the liberal branch of this new women's movement. So the activists are paving the way for changes in the laws, for changes in consciousness, whether it's lesbian rights, issues of rape and sexual harassment, child care. That then links up with liberal goals of labor, and a women's movement takes off in the 70s, from which I argue there is no turning back. In a world in which as many marriages are ending in divorce as not, knowing that they cannot expect to be dependents all of their lives, knowing they need these rights.
Women begin to enter professional fields in greater numbers than ever before.
Captain in the police department of New York City. According to that.
If any profession was typed male, politics had to be perhaps the highest barrier for women, even beyond medicine and law. In a way, women were in a double bind trying to enter politics. You could say you want to clean up politics. You could run as a woman, but it would take you only so far.
There was a candidate, Ruth Hannah McCormick, in about 1928. She ran for Congress, and she answered the question that every woman candidate up until recently has had to answer, and that is, are you running as a woman? And she drew herself up and said, I most certainly am not. I'm running as the daughter of Mark Hanna, he was an Ohio boss, and the wife of the Chicago Tribune, McCormick. That says everything. And that was not reframed until Pat Schroeder ran for president. And Pat used her sense of humor to reframe the whole issue. And so when she was asked, are you running as a woman, she looked at the reporter and said, do I have an option?
Patricia Schroeder is the reason we have the Family Medical Leave Act. She allowed herself to stand up for women's and family issues, and also to try to be one of the boys at the same time, but always say, but I am also a woman. And so I think there's been a shift.